Hello, Sound Engraver here. Welcome to my SNES Soundtracks series, where we are going to be talking today about the Donkey Kong Country series Part 4, starting with the Northern Hemispheres, or the Snowfield stages, composed by Eveline Fischer. For structure, I give it a 10 out of 10. The length is strong here. It's sitting at 2 minutes and 8 seconds, and that is some great length. And it's great for this kind of ambience. You don't ever really grow tired of the music no matter how many tries at the level you make. It's a very peaceful atmosphere, it's quite lovely. There's a beautiful transition from ambience to a somber flute-like synth to a more active bass and percussion and arpeggiation toward the middle of the track. There's a great metric variation from duple to triple groupings between voices and musical gestures. There's a nice subtle transition in arpeggiated synths that go from long sustains to shorter sustains, from long releases to shorter releases. And the activity in the music has also good variety. And it doesn't need to be when we're dealing with good ambient music for gameplay. Instrumentation is also 10 out of 10. The instruments here perfectly depict a mountainous region and that sense of wonder and mood and adventure. There's a good blend of long ambient tones and whimsical cascading arpeggiation, and there's a good pulsation of chords in the middle of the piece. For mood, that is also a 10 out of 10. It is a perfect atmosphere of mountains and falling snow and that ominous icy feeling. The instruments are arpeggiated to create this cascading line, which musically depicts the falling snow. And the range between instruments is also incredible. You've got that low ambient drone in the beginning that ushers in the rest of the activity, and you've got lovely dissonance between the introduction and the first section. You have the tonic high up in the register that is sung by a haunting synth. Its dissonance can easily resolve to the tonic chord, but it never does. And that creates this wonderful dichotomy of beauty and peril. The sound design in the beginning gives the player a sense of distance, but it also gives the player a feeling of walking in a snowy pass. The overall mix is a 10 out of 10. There's this good measure of reverb and delay, but neither sounds oversaturated. The delay works more as the rhythmic pulse than it does as an effect for ambience. There's clean arpeggiation between multiple instruments, and there's a good blend of pitched instruments where you have some that are percussive and others that are melodic. And that brings us to a total score of 40 out of 40, or 100%. Next, we have the Ice Cave Chant, and this is for the Ice Cave stages. For structure, I give it a 6 out of 10. The length is sitting at 1 minute and 50 seconds, and this is pretty good length for gameplay, but I would say that this track in particular is too short for the kind of musical activity and instrumentation given. There isn't much in the way of musical sequence. It does have a complete melody, but I would say this melody is a little repetitive, not really exceeding 4 to 5 notes, and all around I would say that the melody could have been a little bit more dynamic. For instrumentation, I give it a 7 out of 10. There are only a few instruments, but I would say to Fischer's credit, she does work with range and register. There is a variety between resonance and dampened sounds, but on the whole, it's pretty percussive throughout. There should have been instruments with greater sustain and reverb, kind of like the instruments that we hear in the intro. And I would push for that because we are in a cave setting. For a cave, I don't get the impression of distance. Now, I do get the impression of ice. There are chimes playing the melody, and that does evoke a crystallized image. That said, the instruments and effects don't imply echo and distance. Contrast that to David Wise's music for the cave stages. For mood, I give it a 9 out of 10. It's a delightful, happy tune. And I would say it's good musical composition. I would only say that it needed longer musical sections and more length in between sections with musical transitions. It also needs to better depict the icy environment, like Fischer had done so well with her track Northern Hemispheres. The overall mix is an 8 out of 10. It's nice and tight. I would just say a little bit more delay and reverb to better depict the icy cavern. So that gives us a total score of 30 out of 40 or 75%. And finally we have Fear Factory. This is the music for our factory stages, and this is composed by David Wise. For structure, I give it a 10 out of 10. The length is 1 minute and 18 seconds. Now, this is short, and if the composition itself wasn't good, I would dock it a point or two just for the brevity. But the composition is good, starting with the excellent phrasing. It has a great intro with a complete melody that concludes with a nice outro just before the music loops again. It's symmetrical with good transitions between musical ideas, which has the overall composition nice and tight. There's a beautiful add-on toward the end of the melody which carries a lovely sustaining synth and a slow cascade of reverberant chimes. It's this haunting feel that I think has been musically thematic throughout the game. Instrumentation is 10 out of 10. The music begins with this really nice pulse, which I think can easily be affiliated with a factory setting. I think the synth is run through either a tape delay or an arpeggiator. Whichever it is, its rhythm gets the player pumped up for some action. The percussion serves to cue you in on the downbeat. It has a simple kick that doesn't need to be anything more. And there's this great reverberant snare that adds to the environment. It especially complements the horn synthesizers at the end of the melody just before the outro. The main melody goes back to DK's simian roots by utilizing the synth marimba chime hybrid, but that's really the only prominent instrument pertaining to the acoustic feel. There's this interesting unison of bass and higher arpeggiated notes. Now the bass doesn't budge past an intervallic fourth, which is not something you should do as a composer when working in a bass line. That said, David Wise works with a lot of musical activity and timbre, so the bass itself doesn't need to be active here. Mood is 10 out of 10. The mood is perfect for the setting. This music is what classical musicians might call a perpetuum mobile, a music composition that doesn't stop until right at the end. It typically has this driving motion, which we so wonderfully get here. There's suspense and motion throughout the piece, with a curious beauty lingering at the end of the composition. It's beautiful, but don't get too comfortable. These are treacherous drops in this factory, and there's fire. The overall mix is 10 out of 10. Everything is nice and tight. You have delays in all the right places. The melodic and harmonic instruments are at the center if heard by the TV or even in the stereophonic space of the headphones. So that gives us a total score of 40 out of 40 or 100%. I hope you enjoyed my score and analysis of these 3 tracks. I will continue with my Donkey Kong series going forward in the next few weeks, and until I see you next, keep producing and preserving the art and music you love. Thanks again.